June 6, 1944. English Channel. 4:27 a.m. A low fog crept over the water, turning the horizon into a wall of liquid gray. On the deck of a German patrol boat, Oberleutnant Franz Keller lit a cigarette with the tranquility of someone who believed he had the enemy completely under control. He coughed, looked out at the empty sea, and laughed, a short, confident, almost arrogant laugh. If they try to come, they will be crushed before they even reach the shore. Behind him, the radar operators complained about the interference, as always. Noise, static, echoes. Nothing threatening. Nothing that suggested danger. Germany still believed it had the pace of the war under control. The waves crashed against the hull like lazy clocks, marking a time that the Wehrmacht believed it possessed in abundance. But deep within that fog, thousands of shadows were moving. Silent, precise, unstoppable. Keller's cigarette burned to the very end, and when the wind shifted, bringing the first rumble of engines that he couldn't see but could feel, the German officer frowned. Too late. What he didn't know was that on that day he was witnessing the beginning of his own end. The journey to that dawn began years earlier, far from the beaches of Normandy, far from the smell of gunpowder and salt. It began in stuffy rooms, lit by dim lamps, where American engineers debated as they had never debated before. The world was putting pressure on them. Germany was advancing like a colossus. And the Allies needed something that would change the rules. The project began as a bold sketch on paper, an aerial machine capable of transporting troops, cargo, and glory, all at the same time. A steel monster that many said was too big to fly. They called him Higgins Airboat, Floating Crate, Military Aberration. But the official name was simple: C-47 Skitran. In early tests, the aircraft seemed more like a broken promise than a solution. The landing gear was vibrating as if it were about to fall apart at any second. About the Pratt & Whitney R-1830 engine. And one of the initial reports stated with cruel irony, "It takes off whenever it wants, and it only flies if we don't interfere." Nevertheless, the engineers insisted. Refizerum ausis. They adjusted the control surfaces. They reinforced cables, attachment points, and the fuselage. They worked all night without rest. Aircraft crashed during tests. Men died. Critics argued that it would never cross a real battlefield. But 1943 arrived, and with it, the first operational missions. The C-47 was ready. Or at least, that's what everyone expected. None of those present imagined that this apparent failure carried the seeds of victory. The first major test of the C-47 did not take place in Normandy, but in Tunisia, months earlier. There, under the African sun, the Germans watched without fear the first maneuvers of the new American transport planes. And they laughed. Not just once, but repeatedly. The aircraft were slow, vulnerable, and enormous. Perfect targets for anti-aircraft fire. When the first C-47s attempted to drop supplies in a critical operation, a burst of flak ripped through the sky with surgical precision. 5 planes were destroyed in just 3 minutes. Pilots burned inside their cockpits. Equipment fell in flames across the desert. A German report described it with disdain. They fly like bricks carried by hot wind. They are easy prey. The Allies felt the blow. Humiliation. Public disgrace. Doubt has once again surrounded the project. At that moment, it seemed that the enemy was absolutely right. But war rarely rewards laughter. In silence, while Germany celebrated the vulnerability of the flying bricks, the Allies were studying every crack, every flaw, every defeat. And then came the change. The turnaround didn't happen in a single day, but rather as a result of small details that escaped the Germans. New dust filters for desert operations. Structural reinforcement at load points. Improvements to the hyperboloidal navigation system. Pilots specifically trained to fly under anti-aircraft fire. New mid-altitude flight tactics with evasive turns. An American commander wrote after a night test, "The aircraft obeys. And when it obeys, it is relentless." The C-47 was no longer the fragile machine that the Germans had underestimated. It became fast enough, strong enough, and, above all, reliable enough for the impossible. Now, It was time to put the monster to the test before the world. In the early morning of D-Day, German perception changed forever. When Franz Keller heard the first deep rumble in the sky, he thought it was 3, maybe 4 aircraft. But there were 822 C-47s emerging from within the fog like a metallic swarm. A continuous, deep, resounding roar, the cadence of the engines sounded like thunder that never ended. Paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Divisions jumped by the thousands. The sky seemed to tear open. The night transformed into a mosaic of shadows falling over occupied France. The Wehrmacht, perplexed, began broadcasting desperate messages. It's impossible to count them. They're countless. They are everywhere. The enemy fell from the sky. What was once a source of laughter has become a source of terror. The C-47s didn't just bring troops. They brought the certainty that German dominance was evaporating. Entire cities began reporting the same phenomenon. Columns of paratroopers emerging from places where the Germans believed they were safe. Roads blocked. Bridges taken. Communication channels silenced by groups that seemed to spring up out of nowhere. The machine that once flew like a brick was now crashing down on the Reich. Germany still tried to regain control. Troops rushed to strategic points. Vehicles were mobilized in a hurry. Messengers shouted orders that no one else could carry out. But it was too late. The C-47 had created a new logic of warfare. Absolute mobility, deep penetration, multidirectional attack. The doctrine was simple, elegant, brutal. To reach places the enemy cannot imagine. To act before he can react. The German commanders, perplexed, admitted in later reports. There was no defensive line capable of containing this form of warfare. Because she wasn't just technological. It was a philosophical era. While Germany clung to rigidity, centralized control, and fixed fortifications, the Allies relied on fluidity, adaptation, and the improbable. The C-47 was more than just an aircraft. It was the symbol of this new way of thinking, the ability to transform weakness into strength. Defeat despite having the advantage. Bricks, in thunder. With him, the skies, previously dominated by the Luftwaffe, began to change hands. Months later, as France was liberated and the Reich retreated, Oberleutnant Keller was last seen at the former St. Lo base. He looked at the gray sky, heard the deep, familiar rumble of twin engines in the distance, and lowered his head. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He didn't even light another cigarette. Because now he knew. That sound, that distant thunder, it meant that the war had forever slipped out of Germany's hands. The same planes that were the butt of jokes in 1943 now surrounded the country on all sides. Transporting supplies. Launching paratroopers. Reinforcing our fronts. Opening new paths. Strangling the Reich inch by inch. The irony was complete. They laughed when they saw him for the first time. They stopped laughing when they realized that the sound of their laughter was mixed with the thunder of defeat. Because on that day, on the day the C-47 landed on Normandy, Germany realized there was no turning back. And the sky, once the domain of the Reich's eagles, was taken over by a new sound. A deep, constant, endless sound. The thunder spoke, and the sky never belonged to them again.